And welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. It is Wednesday, February 4th. We're back at our 1 o'clock meeting. We're going to spend the next hour or so with a crime research group just to get a feel for what their organization does, and then also to look into some data that they've collected in terms of activity, incarceration, the costs, what they're seeing across the state. So if both of you could introduce yourselves, would be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Weber. I'm the executive director of the Crime Research Group.
Used to be at DOC.
I was. Some of you. I figure I've been gone long enough now that I don't need to bring that up. But yes,
She's been here 40-some years.
Yes,
and this is my 30.
many of you who were on the committee during the time when I had a 10-year tenure at the Department of Corrections. I spent a lot of time. This committee, although albeit it was across the hall. And with me today is
I'm Dr. Robin Joy, and I'm the Director of Research. And I have been at this for 20 some odd years in this capacity, serving Spotty.
Oh, it's all yours.
okay. So we did send you a short document. That's just an overview of who we are. As you mentioned, some of you may or may not be as familiar with us. And so I just wanted to walk through that a little bit, not really spend a whole lot of time on it, but just to let you know, as the Crime Research Group, we are an independent nonprofit organization in Vermont with a real focus on criminal and juvenile justice research. We also serve as something that's called a statistical analysis center. That is a designation that most states have from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. It's kind of this anomaly thing. And you can see on the overview that a SAC has a number of responsibilities, primarily being collecting, analyzing, and distributing criminal justice data, and working with our partners and our stakeholders on doing that, and also conducting research that's really relevant for our state. And in particular, things that you might be considering in this building, but also working with, other criminal justice partners on projects that they might have and developing those projects. So as a statistical analysis center, we contract with the Department of Public Safety to perform those services because they are actually designated as the SAC. That's the shorthand term for Statistical Analysis Center. And through that contract, we're able to come and spend time with you. And we're also able to access funding from the Bureau of Justice Statistics to do further research on topics. In addition, we just sometimes have contracts with other people to do very specific program evaluation types of work. So as Robin mentioned, she's been doing this for over 20 years. CRG has been around as an entity for about 11 years. And so, a lot of the different services we have are laid out in this document. Most people think of us as the data people, but we do provide other types of services as well. I don't need to get into most of those things. But as the Statistical Analysis Center, and I think this gets to what you're talking about, we have access to a wide variety of data sets. Do you want to do this along with your criminal justice pyramid? So, so Robin has I
have visual aids.
A visual aid. So at the bottom of the pyramid, which is not on the handout, is just, people's experiences. So that is a whole lot. There's data in people's experiences, and of course that's harder to capture in what an administrative data or in a data set like we have. Usually that requires going out and talking to people and collecting that information. But that's sort of like the basis or the foundation of what we have here.
Right. And so, and as you know, a lot of crime never makes it to the officials, right? So it never shows up in data sets that we work. So what we want to be conscious of is whose voices aren't represented in the data, and how do we make sure that we get those experiences represented in the data. And there's various ways to go about doing that. one of the largest national surveys is the National Crime Victim Survey, where people go house to house. They used to go house to house. I'm sure there's not more electronic now. And asking people about their victimization. How did you experience crime in your life this year? And what did that look like? And so that gets us a better understanding. That's where we get statistics like 1 out of 4 women will be sexually assaulted by the time they're 21. That doesn't come from, I'm sorry, sir. I'm not a cheerful person. Yeah, right. But that's where we get those statistics from. We don't get those statistics from official data because we know that there's not reporting right on that. There's an under reporting. But then we get to the to calls for service, right? That when somebody does pick up the phone and call the police. And that data is captured in 2 systems in the state, Valcor, which is most of the police systems, and then Little Spillman, which is Hartford, and Norwich, and one other city, I think.
Do they have both systems?
They just use Spillman, ma'am.
Okay.
They did not want to go the route of Valcor, and it's sad for them. Because Valcor actually gives us a lot of access to data that Spillman didn't. Now, I want to be clear that every police department owns their own data. So if we want to ask them for their data, we can. But they own their own data. The Department of Public Safety does not own their data. And that's sometimes some confusion on, yes, well, it's their data. They're creating it. They're collecting it. They're responsible for, data quality, et cetera. And you want to make sure that, you have control over that somebody else isn't handing out your stuff. Now, when we look at police data, and some of your communities are involved in the public safety enhancement team. And so we've been working with your local police departments and mapping your data of the calls for service that the police have. Most of what the police do has absolutely nothing to do with the big crimes, right? It is small quality of life, people in crisis that's taking up a lot of their time. And there is no consistent definition, for example, of what a call for service is for disorderly conduct, regardless of the statute. Let's leave the statute aside. But if I'm going to call the cops and say there's somebody acting funny in town, I need you to come look. A human being, the dispatcher, is going to take my call and code it, right? And they're going to code it as suspicious person. But there's no definition in my town of Barrytown of suspicious person and Barry City. It's not the same definition. It's just right there. So we don't have a common framework for some of that stuff.
Connor could be suspicious here in the building, but
yes,
have Montpelier, he's okay.
He's okay. Yes. So that's important to know that there is a move to get everyone to kind of call the same things, so that we can compare. But it's very difficult. Yeah, it is very difficult.
And the other thing I just want to add is that it is difficult, and yet one of the things that we do as the SAC, and we're the only entity in the state that can do this, is we can take these disparate data sets and still analyze them and work with them together.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and that is one of the skill sets and one of the reasons we exist as an organization.
Yeah, is to make sense of all of those things that don't seem to make sense. To be aware of where the pitfalls are in the data so that we can account for them in our analysis.
So presently, does it just get kind of lost in the shuffle?
No, and most of what you guys care about are the crimes, right? Because you're way up here, right? By the time somebody is in corrections, right, they have committed a crime or have been accused of crime and they're incarcerated. Those we get really good data from something called the National Incident-Based Reporting System. It's a shorthand of NIBRS. And we have been 100% NIBRS compliant. We were one of the first states to do that. Max Schluter, I don't know if you remember him when he was at VCIC, he kind of pushed for that as well. This is a standard, right? So in NIBRS, the definition of an aggravated assault is the same in Vermont as it is across the country. So if we want to know what does aggravated assault look like here compared to New Hampshire, we're talking about the exact same definition. And the thing about this stuff is this goes through an incredible amount of review at the police department level to make sure that these meet all the requirements, that we have all the data fields that we need for an aggravated assault. So you can't submit, for an example, an aggravated assault if you don't have a victim. Where's the victim, right? Let's find the victim, make sure that we've got that victim's information so that we know that this crime really happened. Was there a weapon involved? What was the nature of the weapon? This is one of the most detailed data sets in criminal justice that exists. And there's been lots of research nationally, and we use it a lot as well. It allows us to answer questions about if we wanted to look at domestic violence, what are the exact relationships in domestic violence situations? Is it an intimate partner relationship? Is it a grandparent? Is it an aunt or uncle? Very, very detailed relationship. What type of weapons are used in domestic violence? It's mostly hands, personal weapons, just so you know. What are the experiences of, we have a report on our website about experiences of violence of people of color. People of color, how do they experience violence in Vermont different from, or is it, what is that experience? And what we found there, for example, the very common thing in Vermont, if we just looked at the data, half of our homicides are traditionally domestic violence. That's been the rule for 20 some odd years that I've been doing this. However, if you are a victim of color, then that's not what the danger is. The danger for victims of color is actually strangers and robberies. That's where the homicides are most likely to happen. So it's a different way, right? So how can we break down the victims, or how can we break down perpetrators and understand what's going on? And that's a really rich data set. And we use that a lot to inform you about how crime is going. Is it going up? Is it going down? And what are the parameters around the crimes? Then once we get charged, right, then we've got criminal court data, right? That's coming out of Odyssey now, or Enterprise Justice. And I have going back over 20 years worth of criminal court data, juvenile court data, and all sorts of data. If you want to know something, so last time I was here, the question that I got was how many people who are held without bail are eventually convicted of something, right? That was the question that I got asked, and I went home, and within an hour you had an answer, and the answer was about 70% eventually get convicted, 30% never get convicted of anything after being held without bail for years. Your colleagues down the hall recently asked me that exact same question again, so I dug up the research that I did last time, and I ran the numbers again, and the numbers are still the same. About 30% of people who are incarcerated without bail are never convicted of anything.
Wow.
So there
That's
you
your
go.
detainee population.
That's your
Right, that's
detainee
your detainee
population.
population.
And that's looking within 30 days of right. So sometimes there's something called a global plea deal, where maybe I'm being incarcerated on something out of Chittenden County, but I also have some cases down here in Washington County. I'll plead guilty, or I'll get dismissed up in Chittenden. 30 days later, the case comes up here, and it's all part of the same deal. So we looked 30 days on either side. And so that's where we are, that 30% of the people who are incarcerated without bail are not convicted of anything.
So how many of those would be there with the plea deal at all? Do you know that 30%?
Well, there was no plea deal because there was no conviction.
It's no conviction.
Right.
How large a data set is it?
I've looked for 15 years.
So
Do you want me to look?
So for the last 15 years, 30% of the detainees in Vermont were never convicted of
Held without bail. Yeah. I looked for those that were held without bail,
It's different.
which is different than coming in for 24 hours and right. So yeah, I was
Or held with bail.
or held with bail. Yeah.
Held without bail.
Held without bail. Yeah.
So, Kevin,
Well,
hang on. Kevin?
Thank you.
Oh, all right. Sean?
So I guess this is just a question is like, so just that data of 30% of the people who are supposedly awful and bad because they're not even given the chance at bail.
Or
30.
high risk of flight. Bail is a high risk of
High risk of flight.
Yeah.
But 30% of them they don't get
Charge.
charged with anything.
No,
They
they
get
got charged, not convicted.
They got charged.
Oh, they just didn't get convicted.
So they've
On any
been,
number of things.
On anything. There was no conviction for anything, like not even jaywalking.
So is that a bad thing to hold those people like that for? Yeah, like, isn't that like that's not a good, like, American-y thing to do, is it?
No.
It's up to your courts.
But that's a moral value question, not a statistics
Well,
question.
it's part
Yeah.
of the criminal justice
Yeah.
system.
Well, absolutely.
and then we get up to.
Yeah, so we had, but one thing I want to say about the court data, the other things that you could ask of that data is like, say, like even outside of this committee, if you were interested in coming up with a bill, your constituents are saying that people who commit X crime aren't getting jail time, and I'm really upset about that. You can ask me if that's true, and I will give you the answer. I will tell you this is how many people were convicted, this is how many people were sentenced to jail, or this is how many people were sentenced to fine, or whatever.
You may not like the answer.
You may not like the answer. But I will tell you the answer. So it's always good, right? We recently did something for down the hall. They're handling animal cruelty, right? Better than you, And so we looked up, in that case, we looked at how are people being sentenced for animal cruelty? How many people, what are we really sentencing there? And then in that case, we had to actually physically look at some of the dockets to kind of get a sense of what some of the stuff is there. But yeah, you can ask us these questions as you're coming up with legislation. Yes.
So for that 30%, I would assume that there's some kind of a rationale for the release. If they've been detained, someone has to make a decision that says we're no longer detaining them. They haven't been charged.
No, they were charged.
Convicted,
Right.
but they've been held. Somebody made a decision, we're not gonna hold any judge or jury.
Yeah, you can't hold them after the case is, yeah.
So is there a database that describes why that decision was made?
Why they weren't convicted?
Why the court said we're not gonna hold them any longer?
Well, because they had no authority, right?
So, I mean, I think the answer to your question is no, there's
Yeah.
the rationale for that. I mean, it could be interpolated, but it's not explicit in the data.
Right.
As to why, no.
No.
Because
The
it's
reason why
not.
they were being
Correct.
held, but now we've decided they shouldn't be held.
Just that the case is over and the reason for the case being over is a different.
Is a different-
Yeah.
But they went back to.
They went back
It went back.
The process.
There may not have been enough evidence.
And so there's no evidence or.
None of.
Right, we do not know why there was no conviction. We just know that there was no conviction,
There
right?
was no conviction.
We do not know why there was no conviction. We just know that there was no conviction.
Right.
Correct.
It's the courts that make those decisions.
But is there, also,
Mhm.
so is there, it'd be probably hard, right? But is there court records that would say, I mean, there would be, that it was, we didn't have enough evidence. I mean, some people can just, obviously a jury can just be like, hey, we don't think this right. But is it a technical issue or, do we have ways to get to that data?
Some of the times the docket sheets will give you that information. So technical is, and I'm going to be my former criminal defense attorney here. Technical is usually a constitutional violation, right? So it may not be technical. It's really a violation of the Constitution. So, that's a judgment, but, there is, I think it's a really interesting question. What's happening to that 30%? I think that's a really interesting study.
Right.
It's a number that's been pretty consistent. I can't imagine being incarcerated for a year or 2 years or 3 years and then being sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think Robin raises she said a word that I think is important for us to distinguish because we talked about data requests, which are sort of these simple things where, we have a database. You can ask us the sentences. It's one database. It's a quick query.
Yeah.
Versus this idea of a study where if you were really interested in thinking about, we want to know more about this, that is something that requires a lot more work and typically something that, sometimes we could apply for a grant to get, or if it's something that other people wanted, could come through another source of funds. But it's possible to look into that, but it's a much bigger question. And that's what on the last page of this document, it's sort of like, what's a data request and what's a research request?
Yeah.
And that's a good example of the difference between.
Yeah, that would definitely be research.
So
Yeah.
whether these were adjudicated or the charges were just dropped, what was the average period of detention? And how many people are you talking about?
I'd have to look up what I said. I don't have that number off the top of my head. But I can tell you that answer. Well, I
Technically,
can
there'd be a
give
public
you,
outcry, one would think, if there were all sorts of people that have been held for years and were found innocent or just had charges dropped. It just seems counterintuitive.
But, yeah, we can sort of answer that question on the data. When I responded to the request last time, I assumed that they had been incarcerated since the filing. And I think it was a couple hundred days that people had been held without bail.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
Or a constitutional right,
Yeah.
fundamental rights. Right?
How's that data point compared to other states nationwide?
I don't know. We'd have to, in other states, it's hard because other states have different bail. Right, our bail outlined in the Constitution, in our Vermont Constitution is very narrow. Yeah.
Like risk of flight.
Yeah, other states can include risk of, predictive dangerousness, which there's no scientific way to predict whether somebody's going to be dangerous. Again, just to be out there, there's no scientific way to
It's
do
so
that.
hard to get apples to apples.
Yes.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And then finally, after you do get convicted or during that time of period when you're incarcerated awaiting your trial, you have the OMS, the corrections system,
Which you're familiar with.
which you're familiar with, the data from.
Management system.
Yes, the offender management system that the Department of Corrections maintains. And, I keep saying this is a new system. It's now old, but.
Hey, look, I was there and implemented it, so
Yes.
it's old, right?
The trauma of implementing it is still very, very real. Yes. And from there, we can get all sorts of information. The department keeps incredible amounts of data. And we have a nice relationship with them where, we tend to sit down with them and say, this is what we're interested in studying, or this is what we're, looking at and how can we combine the data. And one of the strengths about us being the Statistical Analysis Center is that we can take all this data, and it's kind of scary to me how much I know about individuals as they go through the system, but I can track you across all these systems and understand your background, your history as you interact with the criminal justice system. Now we're working with the Department of Labor, for example, that we're going to start adding some employment records on top of the data that we already get. So how does employment that shows up in the Department of Labor? Not all employment shows up in the Department of Labor, right? A lot of people work under the table. That stuff never gets reported. But how does the data that gets reported in the Department of Labor impact recidivism rates, for example? Or are people, who are employed at the time that they're charged, do we see that they're able to keep their employment during the charging period? Clearly, you can't if you're incarcerated. But what impact does court dates have on your ability to keep your job?
I'm sorry.
I'm reverting back, the 3070 blows my mind. And who and how does a research request get to you?
You did it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
a few ways. I mean, obviously, if it's something that this committee is really interested in, then that's a conversation around, well, we want to know if you can explore this. And then the question always comes down to, how could it be funded? Is it something that's appropriate for us to put in a grant to the Bureau of Justice Statistics? Would that be something they'd be interested in funding? Are there other revenue sources that could be provided so that we could do it? And I would say it'd be more timely with another revenue source than it would be through the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So yeah, those would be the two main things. It's sort of like, are you interested? Is it something we feel like we could answer? And then what are the
So
resources?
who generally makes a request for research?
Well, it usually
You just did.
you just
You just
did.
did.
It usually comes out of a conversation like
Yeah.
this, and then we will kind of have that analysis
Yeah.
amongst the two of us. And then a lot of times when we're
And-
writing our proposals, we incorporate that into
Yeah.
our
So one
proposals.
example was when we did Council of State Governments 2.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we had some new initiatives. And we wanted to collect the data to see how effective it was. And we put in legislation, language, the crime research group would do it, and we found some money to do it. So it comes from different avenues.
Yeah, it comes from different avenues. So in this case, with this 30%, we would talk to our colleagues at the Defender General's office and the state's attorney's office and the judiciary and say, okay, what's the best way to measure this? What are we really looking at? And then what do we expect the end result to look like? What questions are we really going to answer from this? And so that would be it.
So that's a good segue
Yes.
into your little document.
Yes. Oh, that one. Yes.
Which one do you have?
No, give me.
We have a few of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to do two things. We're going to talk about two things that help you, that can help you kind of go about your job. One is that document, which was the cost benefit analysis that we did of this. And just to plug ourselves, we won an award, a nationally peer reviewed award for that work. Thank you. So this was something that we did in something called Results First. And Monica has.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I have something I can show up on the screen if you want me to join the.
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
fun. Tate can help you.
Tate has sent me the link. I just need to turn on my microphone first.
Yes. Swing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I got a lot of that today.
Yeah.
If I can't guarantee, but I'm going to try and.
So while we're figuring that out, Results First was an initiative that your Joint Fiscal Office hired us to do. It was sponsored by Pew Research and MacArthur T, Catherine D, all those foundations, right?
John D.
John
Catherine
Catherine
T.
Yeah. And we were a state that participated in this. And what we did is we calculated the cost of adding one more person to the system, right? How much does it cost to arrest somebody? How much does it cost to prosecute them? How much does it cost to house them? This is something called a marginal cost. So it was a way, and we got, and we used time records from the police. We used weighted court studies from the judiciary. Monica, when she was at DOC, did a lot of work helping us understand how much does it cost to add one more person to the system. And what this allowed us to do is tell you how much it costs to prosecute somebody, which is a lot. And also to understand the way that your criminal justice actors work. So, for example, we did this in 2015, 2016. Around that time, the legislature also decriminalized pot. At the time, possession of marijuana was one of our top 5 criminal charges in Vermont. It was a huge amount of time and energy for the courts. And the interesting thing that happens here, right, is that you decriminalize pot. No one lost their job. No police department cut funding because their police no longer had to arrest.
Nor were there any cells or units in the corrections
facilities
that were
right.
shut down because of it.
Yeah. Right?
Right.
It was a public policy decision that had very little impact on the cost of criminal justice. Part of that was because what the police were doing, instead of arresting people for smoking pot, is now maybe they're doing the DARE program, or I don't think they do DARE anymore, but or now maybe they're spending more time investigating robberies, or it turns out the people who were using pot were also the people who were using heroin. So, that wasn't helpful in their time management. It didn't shut down any facilities. It didn't shut down any beds because those cases largely weren't getting sentenced to prison anyways. But as you begin to understand how the criminal justice system works, and how people manage their time, because it turns out if you just take away a part of the system, people are going to spend their time doing something else, right? And there's always something else to be done, right? If you were to take away 5 bills that this committee is doing, right, you're not going to go home early, are you? No, you're going to spend more time on other bills. And the same thing is true with the criminal justice system. But when you're trying to understand what programs work, what programs cost money, understanding how the cost of the criminal justice system, helps. And so what we did is we're still having.
Yeah, it's my computer and it's
Yeah.
decided it doesn't like working in the state house.
This tape would put it up.
Okay,
Well, just send him the link.
just send you
I
the.
think it's too much for him.
Yeah.
What? Tate is he is the.
No, I can.
We'll
I
send
can
it to
send
you.
it to you.
Yeah.
So it's fine. I have.
Well, I have it here, it's on our website, so.
No, there's.
No, it's something different. Yeah,
Different.
yeah.
I'm gonna, I'll email.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Dropping the ball.
Kate's not dropping the
Yeah.
ball. We just.
And so one of the things that we did with this, we went through, not only did we cost out the criminal justice system, but we looked at programs that we were offering or that we could offer. And we calculated the cost benefit of those programs to Vermont. Because not everything that works everywhere is going to work here. It's not that we're so much different, but some of the problems we don't have, some of the infrastructure we don't have to make certain programs successful. And so what programs, given as limited dollars that the Vermont has to spend on criminal justice, what would be the best way to reduce the cost to society of crime, to reduce the cost of, not just to society, but how are we going to, well, also to society, how are we, the benefits of stronger families or the benefits of, less crime. So not just less crime in the cost of crime, but also the human cost of crime. I'm sure a few of you still remember from probably 10 years now, the film that was going around about children of incarcerated parents, right? That's the cost of crime. The children who don't have their family intact. And so we cost out all of those things. And colleagues across the country measure certain programs to see. And this is on your Joint Fiscal's website. These were all of the ones that we did for Results First. We did the hub and spoke, that works. It also helps reduce crime. We did intensive family-based services from DCF. Metza on that. The program inventory and the criminal justice. And actually, Tate, if you don't mind, if you could click on the criminal justice preliminary results, and then you'll see what we did. And just scroll. That's all the. Keep going. Yeah. And so we gave you.
Can you enlarge that a little bit,
You
Tate,
can.
at all, or not?
I can read it to you.
Magic tape.
There you go.
Yeah. Right. And so.
That's okay. That's
Okay,
good.
that big, yeah.
Perfect. Right. So what we did, right, because sometimes people see the price tag for some of these programs, and programs are expensive. But what we expect, for example, drug courts as an alternative to incarceration, we would expect that would actually reduce the recidivism. And this was measured, by the way, recidivism here was just another new criminal offense during the study period, not a weird definition like the department has. We just looked at any new conviction. It would reduce recidivism by about 18% if we had more drug courts, if we funded drug courts as an alternative to incarceration. And because people are out in the community potentially paying taxes, or that those kids aren't going to come into care because the parents are home, people aren't dying from drug use, right? That's very expensive. The net benefits to Vermont was about $4,000 per program participant. And it was about 100% chance of being successful. Now, when you compare the same program to probation, it wasn't actually cost effective. And that's because, according to the departments at the time, probation doesn't cost much. It doesn't cost much to add one more person to the system. Right. They've got the same. It's not until you get to the level where the probation officers have 150 people or whatever.
Right, if people are on sort of that risk management supervision where they have a lot more contacts, collateral contacts and in-person contact, and if they're on any other type of monitoring, right, that just increases the cost. But if you're on like administrative probation where you're calling in, right?
Yeah. Right. It's a very cheap program. And so compared to that, drug courts aren't cost effective, doesn't mean that they're still not a good program, right? So these were things that we did for at the time. I want to just point out here, supervision risk with high. At the time, we weren't quite offering that. It wasn't up and running yet inside the facilities. I have since evaluated the program risk intervention services that Kim Bushy, who just retired after her many years of service, started inside the facilities. There's 2 programs in my career that I've evaluated that have done really, really well, diversion and that program. That program is the only program that I've ever seen reduce domestic violence recidivism. It did really well inside the facilities. So we weren't able to do a cost benefit analysis, but that report is on our website and we can send it to you. It was by far one of the most effective programs, and I hope it survives her retirement.
So we have a question here, Troy, and then Connor.
I'm saying this to you, but it's for the benefit of my committee members. This is a sincere question because there's going to be a reaction to it when I ask it.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, we can't.
If we look at correctional industries in prison,
Yeah.
and the net benefits are at 49.19. How much of those net benefits are because of the low wages that we pay within correctional industries?
Sort of, not really.
Okay.
And because when we were doing this one, and we spent a lot of time on this one, and you were part of.
Well, and so, yeah, there's a couple of things I
Yeah.
do want to say about this one, because this one is clearly the industry's program, which is no longer operating in correctional facilities. It again was that huge shift. And so the low wages you're probably talking about now are just for the employment wages, which is different than what this correctional industries was evaluated.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make that clear.
I didn't understand what you just said.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So at the time this study was being completed, there was actually something in corrections called correctional industries. And people had jobs like there was the wood shop where, industries would go out and bid on projects. They made a lot of furniture. They would sell furniture. And then in that process of building that furniture, there were incarcerated individuals who were employed. And industries at the time, the way it was structured, was supposed to be a self-funding type of a project, right? And so those incarcerated people worked for industries. That's different than having a facility job, like working in the kitchen or cleaning the facility. And now correctional industries has been revised and revamped where it doesn't exist the way it did at the time of this study.
And so part of it was because it was self-funding.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was
that's-
losing money.
And yeah.
Because it could not compete. It had Chair Emmons is laughing because this was a large conversation, but it could not compete for various reasons. And so, it wasn't able to get the projects it needed to.
We structured it in a way for it not to.
Not to, yeah.
Yeah.
That was
And we
intentional.
don't have to be self.
That was intentional. And that's a real aside from this, but it's just, it relates to your question, Representative.
Yeah. We also looked at, if you go farther down, Tate, thank you, things that weren't offered in Vermont, but things that we could have looked at the time, whether or not these would, looking at a change of reduction in recidivism, and then whether or not it was going to have some net benefits to Vermont. So all of this was based on studies that other people had done on, on the cost, really rigorous studies that sometimes we can't do in Vermont because of our small size. And we also, Vermont likes to just give like a program to everybody at the same time, and not give me a nice, we're only going to do this program in this county, and then I can have these other counties as a control group, right? We don't do a lot of control group work here. We just like to pass a policy and let everyone do it. Don't do that. As a researcher, I always am like, just let me have my control group, because then that's how we know whether something is different than the status quo. So these, one of the things about this process, and we continued to do that, so like you saw on your joint fiscals website, there were a lot of ways that we use this. At the end of the day, though, this happened at a time, this results first happened at a time that this body, the whole building, was going on this journey called results-based accountability. And results-based accountability There was some thought, and we disagreed with this, there was some thought that results-based accountability conflicted with results first. There was a problem because they both had results in the name, and this was a problem. And so at the end of the day, the faction that wanted results-based accountability won, and this project never continued. So, yeah. It was something that we had hoped that would continue, and that this body, the building, would find useful. That this is, and this is how we're doing. We thought it worked well with results-based accountability. It helps show how to turn the curve or whatever those.
Yeah, they could have.
You remember?
They could have supported each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
could have supported each
They
other.
could have,
Yeah.
yes.
But
But this is here, and the Washington State Institute for Public Policy has continued this work. They actually pioneered it. And so if you do have questions about, hey, we're thinking about starting this program, reach out to us and we'll tell you what the research says about whether we think it would work with our population or not. Yes.
Sure. So I don't think this can answer it. I've got a theory, like all things being equal.
Yeah.
If you think our out-of-state population at Core Civic in a private prison versus people housed in Vermont correctional facilities, we heard testimony yesterday that like the incarcerated population generally likes going to Mississippi, right? Because there's not as much programming. It's pretty chilled out. You get a PlayStation. This is all great. You used to be able to smoke and everything. So not having that programming, I just wonder, like, is there any way to say, like, recidivism rates are higher amongst those who have spent substantial time out of state in a private facility to the point where it negates the savings that you pay moving to these tiny towns and paying people minimum wage to be CEOs?
That's an interesting question. That's a research question. Yeah.
But is that the type of thing we could look into? Or?
Yeah, we could certainly explore that. I think one of the questions I would have, though, and this would be for the department, because I know that in the risk intervention services, they were bringing people back close towards the end of their time.
That's where it gets
so
sticky.
that they could,
Yeah.
right, so that they could benefit from the programming. That as they were getting close to the end, they could benefit from those programs. So we'd have to explore it a little bit.
Yeah,
And
and-
also time framing it of who's going out of state when and when they're coming back. Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
would-
it's
This is the most positive response I've heard. Usually people
Okay.
say, no,
Well-
you can't do that.
well, I mean,
Yes.
yeah, there are, and part of the reason I think you might be receiving that answer, and I didn't hear that testimony. So, but those individuals who spent a lot of time out of state in Core Civic and then came back to do their programming in Vermont would have done that same time in Vermont prior to getting their programming in Vermont.
Right.
And so the time frame was the time frame of that unprogrammed time. Not to say that those people wouldn't be they could have been engaged in a lot of other things. They could be taking advantage of lots of other opportunities depending on what facility that they're in, but they may not be in risk intervention services. But they could be doing voluntary educational programs, and they could be doing a lot of other types of things. So that issue of that time is still that time, regardless of what
I see what you're saying.
facility they're in.
Yeah.
That makes sense too. Yeah.
Yep. And so then the next thing that we want to talk about, there should be another link in there, Tate, for Act 40.
Oh, yeah. So I can talk briefly about Act 40. I think I sent you just to give you an overview, and the chair obviously mentioned this. So in 2023,
It would be on this page or
I sent it to you yesterday
It's
in
It's
the,
off of one of the other reports. It's
I sent it to you in the, yes,
Yes.
there we go. Okay. So here we go. So this is our webpage, and this is where we basically have put the results of Act 40. So in 2023, those of you who are here, passed a bill, as Sharon said, and required the Statistical Analysis Center, which became us, to produce a report with a tremendous amount of data, including recidivism rates, clearance rates, incarceration. And so we worked with all of our criminal justice partners, and really were able to acquire a variety of new data sets, which was really exciting for us. And for Robin to be able to,
For me.
Robin's like me, you know, but it was a good opportunity. And so if you scroll down a little bit further, Nate, you can see that we've split it up into, just keep scrolling down a little bit more. These different sections. So these were the required sections of the report. And so for each section, we have our own, basically it's an interactive section. So you want to start with bail?
Yeah, let's do
So if you
bail.
click on bail, Nate, it'll open up to Tate, I'm sorry, Tate. It'll open up to this interactive page. It takes a little minute, it's a
Yeah,
little
that's a lot
load.
of
A lot of information.
Yes, yeah.
Please wait.
There we go. Yay.
Yeah. So all of these follow the same kind of, format. Yes, thank you. Of what you ordered us to do, what the legislation ordered us to do. And then what I did with it and what we learned. The bail data was really interesting. And so, if you scroll down, let's do. So in all of them, just so you know, we have a comment on the data sources, the data quality, because that's always an issue, caveats around the data or some policies that may be affecting the data. And what, how we handle those. People are always, I think it's always important for us to be transparent about how we handle the data. And so that people can criticize us or we can learn or they agree that I'm correct, which is usually the assumption.
Safe answer.
Sometimes it's not always.
Sometimes not always.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things about the bail data that we learned, so some of the things that have happened in is that the move to Odyssey, the enterprise justice, this allows us to get out a lot of data that we were never able to get out. But it's a huge endeavor to get an entire court system onto a new system. You think of all the folks that are working in the courts and all of the pieces of information that courts collect on a daily basis, hourly basis. And bail is one of those things. And so we're still working with the judiciary to understand how they're capturing the bail data. Because it's and whether people paid it, that was a big question. Did people pay their bail? And that's the question that isn't clear in the judiciary's data that we're still working on them to figure out what's happening. One of the things that we did uncover while we were working with this data is that Addison County, the clerks there were entering data incorrectly. And so that's part of the benefit of doing these studies, right? Okay, this is happening. So now they can go back and fix all that. But we talk about how that happens. But you can go down, if you go down to, let's say, do analysis of DOC data.
You can just click on
You can just click on that, yeah.
Yeah.
And then just go length of stay by charge. We'll do that. So there's all sorts of, just scroll down here. So if you stop here, so in this box, you can choose any crime that I've done, and you can see how long people are staying incarcerated on pretrial detention. And most people are out here in 0 days, and if you hover over this, you'll see something will pop up. There you go. 1,000 people were incarcerated for 1 day. I think this is 0. Yeah.
For violations
of conditions of release. Now, this is the charge that they were held on. One of the things that always, and DOC tells you this every time they come in here about detainees. Most people are cycling in within those 24, 48 hours. That these folks that are here for a long time, they could be here for another reason. But it's important to figure out somebody who spent 1,500 days. That's a lot of days. Well, is it because they were held without bail on another charge? Right. So there's all different ways to kind of.
Which is likely the case.
Which is likely the
on
case.
Violation of conditions of release is that there's some other more serious charge that's associated with it.
Yeah.
Because this isn't unique. It's like everybody's charge was associated. So
So this violation of conditions of release, that is regardless if the person was on probation or furlough.
This is the criminal
The criminal
charge, not the returns violation. This is 7559E.
That doesn't mean anything in this world.
Right.
Yes.
It's different than
This
the way
is-
you think about
Yes,
it. Yes.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is the criminal charge of violating your conditions of release whilst on bail.
While on bail.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
So you're out in the community.
yeah,
You haven't been convicted.
Right.
You've been charged.
You've been charged and you've been given all these conditions when you got bail. And we just finished a study on conditions on violation, this type of violations of conditions of release last year, where we looked at how many people are committing new crimes while they're out on bail. It's actually a very small number of people.
I actually think it'd be easier for this committee if we picked a different crime.
Because of the
Yeah,
different-
I think,
okay.
yeah, so if you want to just go from the drop
Now, that
down.
one's important because if we do pretrial supervision,
Yes.
Yes,
you're working with these folks.
yes, but I do think it's important to understand is that these outliers who are here for a long time have other charges, and it's likely
Yeah.
the other charge and not the violation of condition of release charge
Yeah.
that is keeping them in.
And it may
for that
not
long.
even be related to this case.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the other issue with the folks that are involved in the system. It's people don't just wait for their case to be over before something else happens to them, right? And right, they could have case one that's going on, they could be on probation on this other case, they could be, and then they get a new arrest, right? So it's all curlicues. But you can see if you go through these crimes, you could domestic assaults, how many people are spending time on pretrial detention?
So
on
has
domestic assaults?
they've been charged.
They've been
Yeah.
charged, right? This is
So
just
this is
on
really
bail and
important.
pretrial detention, right?
They've been charged.
They've been charged.
Convictions.
No convictions yet. And one of the things I was talking to, one of the things that is always in my time here, just kind of, and this is from a economic perspective, not a justice perspective necessarily, but the amount that it costs to process somebody, for them to be inside on bail or, waiting for their bail to be paid for less than 24 hours. Right? Because we were talking about this, you have to screen them, right? You have to do all the intake forms, and then 3 hours later, they pay their bill.
And it's DOC
Yeah.
does that.
Right.
So it's part of their budget.
So it's part of their budget,
It's part of the
right?
budget.
Yes,
And
yes.
the healthcare screenings, as you all know.
And the health, right, and the
Yeah.
healthcare screens.
And how many, Monica, I'm gonna pick your brain on this.
I remember.
You're not gonna remember. I know. How many folks go through our correctional systems on a yearly basis? 4,000? Is it as high as 4,000?
You overall, the total number of people, it used to be a lot higher than that.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I know it went down.
It's around 4,000.
Yeah.
For some reason, that go through our booking areas.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to, when I started again, that was 2012, it was like 12,000 people. If you looked at how many people who just the churn through in an annual basis.
Well, would that be unique people you're talking about, or would each?
Well,
No,
Somebody count 3 times, yeah?
It's a churn. It's
a
the
churn.
number of intakes, right? So, yeah.
Repeat.
yeah, because it's taken the same amount of time from the.
It has gone down
State.
significantly.
Yeah.
I don't know what the number is though right now.
Troy.
I want to ask you a question based on things I hear routinely, especially in Burlington. Kate, can you click the drop down to retail theft 900 or less? One of the things we hear consistently is, especially around retail theft 900 or less, is this kind of constant, they're in and they're out, they're in and they're out, right? And we clearly still have, for this charge, plenty of people detained for 250, 500, 750. So what is the data telling us, just from this screenshot?
Yeah.
Like, how does that compare to the rhetoric?
So, 2 things about the rhetoric. So people are coming, this is still, you're still innocent, right? So
Certainly.
at this point, you're still innocent. And what this is telling you is that 400 people came into the system, were innocent, spent time, a day or two, that's probably 1 day up the top there, Tate. 1 day. So almost 400 people during the study period went through the process of being booked into the Department of Corrections for 24 hours or less.
Mhm.
For retail theft. That's the, right?
Yeah.
And so somebody's life was picked up, moved for 24 hours, and then they were released because they met the responsibility of paying their bail, or somebody paid the bail.
Yeah.
And they were back out on the street, yes, within 24 hours, but they are still innocent at that point.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah,
But that doesn't help the people who are on Reddit talking about all these people on Church Street who I see continually
sure.
bolting from Lululemon with, right?
Right,
I saw
right,
them
yeah.
yesterday and I'm gonna see them next week, or I saw them
Yes.
2 weeks ago. Right, so my question is, how do I access this to put some data to that?
So this is supporting what people think they see.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
This is supporting what people think they see. We've talked to some communities and, and sometimes, and we spoke to Burlington, and I know that they were doing a lot with bringing people in. Here's the Vermont Constitution.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The accountability court that has started up there, that may impact something, that may make people feel a little bit better about that something is being done. Justice takes a long, long time. It's, and we do not have a, Judge Dredd kind of, I'm dating myself here, but right. But at least some of you laugh. Right, we don't have that kind of system. One of the things that, people like retribution in American jurisprudence and in American criminal justice, but it is the one government policy that has consistently failed for centuries. That for as long as retribution has been part of jurisprudence, it is a value of multiple societies across time, right? It first shows up in 1700 BC. It's the first time it shows up. But if you look at the value of retribution as a society, what have we gained from that? How are we better off as a society because of retribution? And that's where, it's not an evidence-based policy.
Right, it's taken it to a different, and then convincing people on Reddit.
Right, it's a perception, but as far as our government policy goes, retribution has not done its job, right?
Yeah, type that into Reddit and see what happens.
So at the bottom of if you go to additional Act 40 reports, these are all the other reports that we did. And so if we do returns to incarceration from community supervision, so this is the other violations. This is the violations
These are
that
the
you
ones
guys
that are
are
about-
used to talking
right.
about in this
Yeah.
committee. In this one, what we did is we, DOC gave us all the data that about people coming back in. You guys changed the policy, right? That was something that happens. And if you go down to, just keep scrolling. There we go. So we can start here. So this is just number of individuals by the number of times they are returned. So this is after they've been released from the facility, they've been convicted, they're on any number of different statuses. How many times? Most people are coming in just once, but some people come back seven times, right, during the study period. So we want to understand who are those, but this is a really important kind of slope, right? So this also gets to that churn, like, is it the same people? Well, no, most people are just coming back, right? That slope is pretty clear. There's a few outliers down here.
Yeah, most people.
But most people aren't. So then we did returns, reasons for return, if you go to that. Yeah,
Right, a little reasons for return.
yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so this was right in here, you can see your change of policy. And there's also some change of the way that.
Well,
DOC
yeah, I
kept
mean-
some of this data.
Right, so you can see here clearly, at the time, it was hard at DOC at the time, the absconder status wasn't captured quite as well as it used to be. And so you can see that the violations were pretty high up until 2021, well, COVID, and then 2021 when the policy changed. And then data changes, and then of course, the absconders go up because of the change in the data collection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is your change of policy, right? So you
Yeah.
did change policy and you changed behavior. So congratulations, right? This is what you wanted and this is what happens.
So a lot of those returns were technical violations.
Well, as you can
That
see,
was
these
the
were
return.
violation and then new crime. We were able to distinguish
Distinguish
them
between,
out. Yeah.
between new
So
crime.
violation of a condition is not a sentence.
Correct.
Right.
A violation of condition of their supervision.
That's not a sentence, because some folks are confused about it.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Not a-
And then you can see, if we scroll down just a little bit more, we gave you the returns by different field offices. So you can see how how your policy was impacted and carried out in the field offices. You can see that Burlington certainly had a lot of, violations, technical violations, and then that those kind of stopped. And the same with Berry City. And then, St. Johnsbury here, this was the issue with COVID. So that's what you're seeing there is the COVID.
The gap that there's absolutely no returns was because the St. Johnsbury field office was very focused on the Northeast Correctional Complex, which had for those of you who weren't here, that had the first COVID outbreak. And so there was a lot of deployment and.
But it's interesting that Bennington, there's not much data for Middlebury, but Bennington and Springfield stayed pretty consistent.
Yeah. And there's not that, these are the daily, and I think you could try hovering over something, see if it pops up. Yeah. So these aren't very, those are these are the day to day, right? We were interested in how many people are coming back in a day. But yeah, so it's not very many people, and overall, not very many people.
But it stayed consistent.
Yeah, it stayed
When we
consistent.
changed The law, it changed, it was pretty consistent, those two county areas for the PMP office.
Yeah. So that indicates that there was a culture in the offices that was contributing to the violations, right? As opposed to policy, perhaps, because you changed the policy and nothing.
It stayed the same, but the culture changed.
Yeah, right.
So in Burlington and Barry, the culture really changed.
Yeah.
In addition to the policy.
Right. Well, and the policy helped change the
So
culture, right?
prior to changing, the change was in terms of technical violations, when you pull them back and for how long, right?
Yeah.
So in some towns like Barry and Burlington, the culture was even if you had one violation, boom, you came back.
Well, and I understand that this return policy, in addition to some of the other things related to the bail policies, the combination of those, I know has now been something that's been reconsidered because of potential impact in the communities. That's my understanding. I'm not there anymore, so I can't say how the Department of Corrections is doing it now. But it did have the effect, what we show is that the policy and the legislation that was passed did have the impact it was intended to have.
And then that changes over the years because the legislature changes. And then
And then the legislature changed it again, right?
there's different focus, and then there's pressure from the community. So then we undo laws that we put in place that may be working. And then we undo them thinking we're doing better.
Right, correct.
Sometimes we do better and sometimes we do worse.
Yeah, so the commissioner was in a couple of weeks ago and he said, good news, incarceration's going down nationally at a pretty high rate there.
Yeah.
And usually Vermont's a couple of years behind. And we're optimistic with that, but I think we've had trouble connecting the dots, why that might be true. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, crime is down.
Crime is down.
So the United States is about to have the lowest homicide rate since 1900. And so crime is down. So that helps. What's interesting is we don't know why crime is down. I just attended a webinar on this, so I'm gonna spare you the whole lecture, but we don't know why crime is down. It just is. Part of it, they think, is a few things, especially homicide. So specifically, this was about nationwide, our homicide rate is going down. One of the things that's interesting is, and this would affect Vermont and what is considered crime. Because people have gone to a mostly cashless society, the the benefits from robbery are a lot less.
Interesting.
And robbery is a crime that leads to high fatalities. So I may not intend to murder you when I hold you up, but something happens and that happens, right? So we're seeing fewer robberies because there's no benefit. But what we are seeing, that doesn't mean the property crime's gone away. It just means that it's not showing up in the data. And if you think about it, one of the things that they're talking about as far as crime data and statistics, let's say you notice a fraudulent charge in your credit card. You're not calling the cops. You're just calling your bank, right? None of us would even think to report that or just waste anyone's time with it necessarily, right? Because we get our get solved right then and there. So a lot of property crime is not even showing up in the data because we aren't, as people, well, no, we're affected by it, but we're handling it by ourselves.
We have a different.
Right. We wouldn't even necessarily consider like I've been a victim of a crime. That is much different than if my purse gets stolen or something like that, right?
You're gonna go to your credit card.
Right, you're just gonna go to your credit card.
$900 charge and
Yeah.
your credit card you didn't.
Right.
You've been victimized, but you don't think of it.
You don't think-
that way.
right.
Call The
It's
police,
just right.
you're gonna call your credit card.
You're gonna call your credit card
Say,
company. Yes.
Charge was it too, and then you deal with the credit card.
Right.
company to
Yeah.
that cost.
And none of that
Um,
gets ported.
and none of
in
that gets in
the-
any of the data
Except for
systems.
the very bottom, people's experiences, in
Right.
which case, we may or may
You
not get
may
it.
or
Yeah.
not. So as, this kind of identity theft or that kind of crime has happened and continues to happen and grow. If it's not a crime or people aren't reporting it, then your incarceration rates are going to go down.
All right. So, like we still see the incarceration rates high in Vermont, right?
Yes.
They are high.
Yes.
Yep.
But do we think maybe the national trend eventually will come here and we'll start to see that ticking down a bit? I'm asking you to look at the crystal ball, right?
One of the things that we're going to start doing in our data when we testify or about sentences or so on and so forth, and I'm stealing this from the district attorney in Philadelphia. They do a lot of with data. They're very good with their data. He reports out every year how many subsequent years. So let's say everyone that gets sentenced everyone who gets sentenced for burglary this year, it ends up being that Vermont judiciary has sentenced people to a total of 100 future years of incarceration, right? Because they just keep sentencing everybody to incarceration. So he's reporting out, it's a very interesting number. This is how many people were sentenced to jail this year. This is how many years cumulatively they were sentenced to. This is how many years the state of Vermont is obligated to house them. And that's a different way of kind of looking at our data, I think, which is very interesting. We kind of talk about what is a fair punishment for a crime, and we hope that the crime, the punishment is somehow related to the crime, and that it makes sense. But how many future years of tax dollars are you promising that the state of Vermont is going to pay for? And in kind of doing those projections. So. I think the answer would be, I would have to look to see what the judiciary is currently doing with their sentencing policy and are they sentencing fewer people and for less time.
And then it's your cumulative amount.
But then it's the cumulative amount.
So someone may be 10 years, another person is 5, and
Right.
then you're at 15 years, and then another person's at
Right.
10, so you're 25 cumulative years.
25 cumulative years
Yeah.
of incarceration.
90,000 a pop.
Right. That Vermonters will pay for.
So then the question becomes, is it cheaper to incarcerate folks
Never.
than it is for the amount of money it's costing the community for the crime?
I have never seen any study that supports the idea that incarceration is cheaper. The only time that incarceration is cheaper is compared to the death penalty. It is more expensive to execute somebody than it is to house them for life. But that's the only studies that I'm aware of where incarceration, again, because there's all this collateral consequences of incarceration. It's not a healthy environment for the person to be in, first of all, right? And there's damage to the family, there's the loss of income for that person. There's a lot of collateral consequences just for the act of incarceration, plus the cost of incarceration.
How do you calculate to the cost of the affected citizens?
Sure. So there's actually lots of studies that tend to look at what those costs might be. So when we try to look at, in our cost benefit analysis, we did look at the cost of victimization. And so the cost of victimization include things like a loss of work for the victim, loss of time to go to court or to go to medical appointments or counseling. So in order to calculate that stuff, we worked with the Crime Victim Services, who does the compensation fund. But what are they compensating people for? Things like changing your lungs, and right. And not everyone accesses these services or can, so we calculate that in. We also look at the cost of loss of property and the values of property, the increased cost of insurance for your retailers in Burlington or so on. So there is a lot of costs that go on to crime. And that we calculate, but incarceration has never kind of limited those costs. What you're asking is how many people go on to commit crime again, right? And so that person may not be committing a crime with all the time that they're incarcerated, but that's usually not enough to move the needle. In most cases, there are absolutely cases where we can see that somebody's been released back into the community and the crime rate in that community goes up a little bit. And that's in Vermont. Not nationally, you usually don't see that. It's just that we're a very small community. But overall, policy-wise, no, incarceration has never made an impact on the crime rate.
Because I'm sure that people have questions about this. Is incarceration is not always about money. There's plenty of things that, there's rehabilitation, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw a really crazy example out where it's not about money. Jeffrey Dahmer type person should never be out in a society. It's going to cost a lot of money to keep him in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So just like when people were thinking about this, that it's not. We are talking about money here.
Right.
We are also talking about most people probably can be rehabilitated, et cetera. But there's exceptions. It just doesn't mean it's still not cheaper when we're talking about it. So.
Yeah.
Or even a death penalty. When you think about it in your head, you go, how's it more expensive? And you start thinking about the legal costs and all the things that we have in our system that add to the cost, which is why the death penalty costs more money than in prison. It's not, nothing's cut and dry. There's no, if you start thinking like, oh, this is the way it is, to start going into a little tangent, start looking at well, you already know this. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to these guys. But it's always more than what we think. There's reasons why things that don't sound right on their face often are.
I love this testimony because like everything's under your umbrella, so we can just ask whatever. It's a beautiful thing, really. But
It's a beautiful thing.
I wonder, so I always used to get ticked off. I worked for VSEA, and people would say, we have so many state employees compared to other states. But in truth, like a lot of other states have county systems, right? And county jails and city jails, right?
Yeah.
How do you get like an apples to apples cost comparison for incarceration when we're working in such different systems? Like county employees could have completely different pension plan, county to county in other states, right? And does that figure into the cost of incarceration?
So what we do in Vermont is generally we look at the cost of an out-of-state bed. That's generally been what does an out-of-state bed cost us? That's what we used in that report, because that was like the most expensive.
Well, no, the reason, my recollection of the reason was because if there was going to be any reduction in incarceration, the goal, as is always the goal, right, was to try and stop using the out-of-state beds. So if we were to think about what would be the saving and what would be, if we wanted to compare it to, it would be those beds versus the in-state beds.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I would do.
But it also doesn't get calculated, even though it may be whatever it is a day or a year, 25, 30,000 a year, and you save one bed, doesn't mean you've saved that 25, 30,000.
No, because
I think that's important for people.
Yes.
to know.
Yeah.
Because it's a cost. that
Right.
you're not gonna absorb that.
And what we've shown, and I think there's been other studies, is around, the savings needs to be around reducing the population enough that you can close the unit,
Yeah.
close and, stop using the out-of-state facilities, and that requires. I mean, I believe that's why the Justice Reinvestment too was started in Vermont, so that they can reduce it enough. Yeah.
Well, well, all I was gonna say, and I think it's kind of what you were hitting at in your research with maybe comparing it, with other states or other jurisdictions, is that you can't really, I don't think anyone's trying to achieve economies of scales with prisons. It's like if we were to hypothetically triple our prison population, it would reduce that bed number or, cost per bed, but you're not really shifting costs. So it's all rooted in public safety.
Yeah. And the public safety, the things that reduce crime are generally broader based community supports. Education reduces crime, right? So when we're looking at, how do we stop people from committing crimes? Deterrence as deterrence only, so one of the ideas behind our punishment system is deterrence, specific and general. Specific deterrence is I'm not going to commit a crime because I'm afraid. General deterrence is we're all not committing crimes because we don't want to go to jail. There's not a lot of research that supports corrections as a deterrence. There is research that supports cops as deterrence. And it turns out you're less likely to shoplift as there's a cop right there watching you, right? This is very obvious, we think. But there's a lot of research that supports that. So it is often cheaper to put more police officers on the streets than it is to increase incarceration, and you would have an increase. You would have the corresponding decrease in crime because when they are visible and they are out there, then that science does say that people are deterred from committing that crime.
Nice to hear that.
Yes.
The death penalty, a lot of people say the death penalty deters crime.
It does not. There's been no evidence of that. The only justification for the death penalty left is retribution. And again, that's the policy that's failed. None of us are doing.
Say that one more time. The only justification
For the death penalty that's left is retribution. It does not rehabilitate, right? It doesn't rehabilitate the offender. It does not. It doesn't deter other people. It certainly, I mean, you could argue that it incapacitates him, but so does prison.
so the statistics.
Wow.
A murderer will murder again. Statistics don't support that.
I'm not sure I
Someone
understand.
who murders someone.
Yeah.
If you don't incarcerate them or take their life, they.
Well, so incarcerating them is different than killing them, right? So,
Well, I understand,
yeah,
but
yes.
They can't kill if they're in the prison.
Right, that's
They can't kill if they're not
incapacitation.
alive.
That's incapacitation, yes.
So what do the statistics show about?
Actually, so our homicides here in Vermont, because they tend to be so personal, they are not likely to recidivate.
They got rid of their problem.
They-
It's a
yeah.
very low recidivism.
So our homicides in Vermont are very low recidivism. Nationally, when you look at homicide recidivists, it depends on the type of homicides you're talking about. Oftentimes those robberies that went bad, or things like that. But it's so that's incapacitation. It's not necessarily deterrence. So, yeah.
But does the death penalty make the people who it has done something to their loved ones? Is there data that shows that they're happier with that outcome?
So I really hope we're not considering bringing the death penalty back. Wow, you can
No,
afford that.
Brought it
Yeah.
up.
No, it's all right. But you see, actually, but I will say, because I actually was a death penalty attorney. And so the studies are very, there is some, the night of the execution, there is some relief or it's over, et cetera, but long-term psychological benefit or the psychological impact on the families of the affected. There's a lot of studies that say that none of it is good. None of it is good. None of it is good for anyone. Let's put it that way.
Heals people.
It does not heal its people. Yeah.
That's a nice way. To
Yeah.
Doesn't heal as people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, just on this retribution topic.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to remember, this has been a few years ago when I was reading this book about criminal justice statistics.
Mhm.
And if I remember correctly, I think it was on the death penalty, and I think it showed that 88 or 89% of people, it was high 80s, did not, and maybe it had just been about incarceration, so I'm getting my the basis of it fuzzy, but that they did not want to see what the sentence was for that individual actually happened. They wanted to see it to a lesser degree. There was a mixture of responses from people saying,
Yeah, that makes
they
sense.
wanted an apology, that they wanted a restorative process
Yes.
to really meet with the individual, and try to come to some resolution on their own terms independently of the court.
Yeah.
Was also part of that. Now, I don't know how outdated that statistic is. I didn't know if
I don't know, but that definitely, you know, if you go back in history to the victims' rights movement, which is, you know, 1970s is when it really kind of took forward. And then that coincides with our restorative movement here in Vermont of making people whole and making the community whole, which is different than retribution. It is different than incapacitation or deterrence. You know, it is a different value that is being espoused. So I'm not surprised. A lot of times people do feel like the criminal justice system is not responsive to them, or to, you know, regardless of the death penalty or not. I mean, just even if you talk to some of your shopkeepers, they may not feel that the criminal justice system is responsive enough, or that the punishment was what they wanted, or that they were made whole. So Vermont, as it tries to incorporate more restorative practices, you may see a change there. And one of the things that we do know, there was a recent study that just came out, which I find fascinating. If you were born and raised in a high homicide state, so I'm going to pick on Alabama, and you move to Vermont, a low homicide state, your risk of being killed by homicide is exactly the same as if you had never left. And that's because they think what's happening is that you grew up in a place where you do not have faith in the systems, that the systems didn't work for you. And so people handled their business outside of the courts, outside of the government, and that leads to your high homicide rates, right? And when you move to a place like Vermont, because you don't have the faith and the value in those institutions of the police, of the courts, that they're going to do what you need them to do, then you still are in that same position where you're outside of our formal social control and protection. And so you still have the same risk of dying of homicide as if you'd never left Alabama.
Is that true in the reverse?
But if you go back, no, not necessarily. But they didn't look at the researchers admittedly didn't look at that. I mean, that's definitely an interesting question. But you know, this interstate migration, and you leave one place hoping for a better life in another, and your risk of being killed of homicide still remains the same. Yeah.
Is it your perception of the system?
Right.
In lack of
Right.
trust.
And what are we doing, right? This is also something that works very well for crime control, is how do you increase people's belief that the system is going to work for them when you need it to, right? And that is definitely something that I think we could work on.
We got to make the system better.
Yes. Well, thankfully you are right in the right spot to do that, aren't you?
Being punitive doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And being rehabilitative works in some cases, and then other cases doesn't always work either. Because sometimes people have to really hit the bottom before they.
Right. Rehabilitation is a continuum, right? Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming in. I hope it helped the committee, and the Crime Research Group is an asset, and it's a tool that we can work with. They're there to help. In the past, we've done legislation and really incorporated the Crime Research Group, work on the data, come back.
Yeah.
Monica, you've been around enough.
We've both been around.
Yes.
enough. Yes, yeah.
And that Act 40 report, there's an order there in the statute, we're supposed to update it. The feds is this real wood?
Yeah,
But-
so we had,
Yes.
it's been almost a year since the grant, it's a year late, the grant that we typically apply for to do this research, it was just released, thankfully. And so we are applying to continue so that we can update the Act 40 report in 27, which is what the statute requires. But, you know, we won't know if we have that money, and so.
Yeah.
Soon.
You know.
Well, no,
Yeah.
and then we will let you know, because then I
Yes.
think that's a
Then
discussion
it's a
amongst
discussion.
the people in this, building as to whether or not that's something that you want to continue and how do we continue it. But
Yeah.
that is our plan.
Can you send us the data or the research for the 30%?
Yeah, it was an email, but yeah, I can resend it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Insights. Sometimes my.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I will send it to you personally. Yep.
To all of us.
Yeah.
To the whole committee?
To the whole
Okay.
committee? Yep,
Sure.
okay.
We'll send it to Tate.
I'll send it to Tate,
Tate,
yes.
you're the man. We'll just send it to you.
We'll just send it to you, yeah.
Send it to-
So I want to thank you for coming in. I hope
Yeah.
this is informative for the committee and know that you're out there for a resource.
Yes.
Yes.
You might want
Happy to
to
come
come
back.
back for a few minutes because we're going to hear sponsored a bill on earn time.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I don't know if I'm mentally ready for that. Many of you don't know, but you know.
You can hang around.
But yeah, I can hang around. Are you the sponsor of the bill?
I can be that
Fun.
Careful that seat.
And I make it out of the room.
Come on up, Chris, that we are going to take about 10 minutes worth of testimony from the sponsor bill.
You can do it in half of that.
Okay, that works.
Good, we love it.
Richard.
We love you already.
52. So. Copy number 52. And welcome. We had a few minutes that we could squeeze you in.
Thank you so much.
Has been
We're on it, so we have to be
chock full for the last couple of weeks. If you could just identify yourself.
Sure can.
careful.
For the record, I'm Chris Pritchard. I represent the Bennington Rutland District, so the towns of Pollitt, Middletown Springs, Rupert, Wells, I share with Patty McCoy, and Pollitt. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity. I wanted to start by thanking Chair Emmons and her committee members for allowing me this opportunity. I also wanted to recognize Chair Emmons, who graciously and willingly assisted this new representative when I reached out to her for help and guidance with this bill. Chair Emmons introduced me to Isaac Dano and his staff at the Department of Corrections, who were helpful in answering questions and verifying facts. Thank you, Chair Emmons, for your kindness. I have come here before you today to present and ask this committee's consideration for H-252. I was asked by one of my constituents if I would submit this bill on behalf of her husband and others that have lost loved ones at the hands of individuals that have been convicted of multiple felonies. In the case of my constituent, the person responsible for her husband's death had a criminal record that consisted of over 30 misdemeanors, and prior to that tragic day, this individual was a 9-time convicted felon. This person was willing to place his own mother behind the wheel of the vehicle he was driving to take the blame for his own actions. He is now serving time as a 10-time convicted felon, and his sentencing included habitual offender enhancement. The crime that resulted in the death of my constituent's husband does not disqualify the convicted from the exceptions in the earned time law that is in effect, which grants this person, through good behavior in prison, the means to reduce the sentence he was given by nearly 25%. What H-252 does is this. It allows a first-time convicted felon a second chance, provided the crime they were convicted and sentenced to wasn't a listed exclusion. It allows them a pathway to re-enter society sooner, get their life back on track, and I believe that in most all cases,
We all deserve a second chance, but a third, a fourth, a 10th. I appreciate the hard work this committee does, and I know it's difficult work you undertake to make policy that offers equitable justice for all. I believe H-252 is a step in that direction. My discussion with Ben and Eric at legal counsel was very difficult in some cases due to no defined law or statute to list specific definitions such as murder. After some discussion with Eric, this bill was just written to include all felonies. And when I thought about it, I really couldn't think of a worthy exclusion. Is there really such a thing as a good felony? The change which relates to 28 VSA 18 is this. It would add to the section 811 these additional 14 words. To offenders sentenced for a felony after having previously been convicted of a felony. H-252 was the first bill I have introduced, and it's probably going to be the last one. And the timeline for the submission for the first half of the biennium was approaching fast. I did my best to reach out to as many representatives in person as I could to speak, to seek support as co-sponsors in the limited time I had. This bill comes to you with tripartisan support. Nearly a third of all House members have co-sponsored this bill. And among those are 7 of the 11 members that sit on this committee. I have since had several dozen members offer their support for this bill, which is close to nearly half of the legislators that represent Vermonters in this House chamber. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present this bill for your consideration. It is my hope that this committee will be willing to have a conversation about H-252 and that my constituent will also have the opportunity to share her story with this committee and the justice she still seeks 10 years later. H-252 is about hope, the hope of restoring justice, fairness, and respect for the victims' families and their loved ones and the loss they have to endure every day. I thank you on their behalf for your consideration.
So do you know how long the sentence is and if there's a minimum and a maximum?
I didn't bring all those details with me. I have those. I had hoped, the constituent that asked me to submit this on her behalf, I sat down with her and we have a portfolio of those things. And I felt I felt that she should tell you her story and explain what she has been through. So I wanted it short and sweet and just to tell you what it was about and the reasons that she asked me to bring it forward.
And we reached out last year a number of times.
This committee was wonderful in helping me do that. Her and her husband had a farm, and a horse farm that they take care of animals, pastures, hay, and they worked that together for years and years. And she is trying to keep that going, and it's hard for her to get away and make a 2-hour drive up here.
Did you explain to her, even though it's better in person, that she could do it remotely?
I did.
They work really hard.
Yeah. It's a powerful story. And
So I just want to say, depending what the sentence is, doesn't matter when their minimum is up. They can earn time. Once a person's minimum is up, they are eligible for release. Doesn't mean they will be released. They can be released on furlough or they could be released on parole. Either version, they would have to be reviewed by a DOC and based on many factors. And quite often people are not released at their minimum. for a variety of reasons. If they are trying for parole, it's the parole board that makes that decision. So there are checks and balances as we go along the way. So even though there's earned time that is earned, when they're due to be released, it's not an automatic because there is a review of that. So I just want to put that on the table. And if there are some major violations of DOC rules while they're in facilities, they could be violated with a disciplinary report, major disciplinary report that would disallow them from receiving some earned time. And if they were reincarcerated while they were out, like on furlough or parole, for a new violation, then they could lose some earned time. So it's not just the blanket, they're going to get it automatically. There are behavior issues that the person who's incarcerated has to abide by for the security and safety of the facility, and in order for our staff to have some management tools. So I just want to put that out on the table so people can balance the whole conversation. Sean.
Chris, thanks for coming in. I know that wasn't easy. I guess I don't want to, I don't want to take away anything from the testimony that your constituent will give, but do you mind just explaining like what happened?
As I said, they had a horse farm. She still does. She's trying to keep it going.
Yeah.
And this happened about 10 years ago. And her husband was walking down the road they live on. It's a rural road. It's in Timoth. And to go to the next horse pasture.
Yeah.
When he was run over, this person ran him over, left the scene, left him there dead.
Yeah.
Side of the road. When they finally found him, his mother had, I don't think he lives that far down the road. I don't know all the details of this, but he had tried to put his mother as the driver of the vehicle that caused this. He was under the influence of drugs when he was arrested. Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, that's helpful. Thank you.
Troy.
Also want to express my gratitude. And I want to ask just a clarifying question, because the sentence that you amended in the statute is pretty broad. Like Sean said too, I'm just incredibly grateful that you bring this to us. I'm a firm believer that when our constituents ask us to do this, that we do this, right? It's a privilege to be in these seats that not everybody has. So thank you. And I don't want to answer your question that you asked about, is there any such thing as a good felony? But I want to distinguish between violent and non-violent felonies, because that is a distinction in our statutes. And we have 5 classes of felonies, A to E, in increasing levels of violence and impact. So did you think about that at all? About
we did
out between A and E?
We did. I spoke to Eric about it, and originally when I started the bill with Ben, and I had my constituent on the phone and we talked about it, and his I believe what he was convicted of was vehicular homicide, death resulting, or something like that. And so, what my constituent's concerned, she just wanted, listen, if somebody is murdered or if somebody, loses their life, death resulting in whatever, these should be covered. And what Ben said and Eric said is Vermont doesn't define murder. There's no definition of murder. So you would have to say, well, if you do this or this or this or this, and pretty soon you have a list, 300 different things. So, I said, well, what happens if you just, say all felonies? He said, that would cover it. So I guess what I say to this committee is, this bill is here for your consideration to fix, if you will, or to look at. I don't know, certainly what happened to my constituent and the circumstances, that person should not be allowed earned time. He just should. I find it morally wrong. So, as Representative Hedrick said, that there's nonviolent. I know that, and that's for your consideration. But there's certainly 6 exclusions in this. I believe there's 6 exclusions in the earned time. It's not enough. It's just not enough, and it doesn't. If it doesn't cover the story I just told you, it's not enough. So all I'm asking is to think of these families and think of what they've gone through, and think of this situation, because there's a lot of them, and just make it right. That's all I'm asking for. That's all I'm asking for.
So do you know if your constituent is receiving notice from DOC about how
No,
much?
that's been a problem. That has been a
It's
problem.
been a problem in what way? Has she opted in? I mean, is she on the list?
Yes, I believe she is. And she was actually in court 2 weeks ago with ongoing issues with this on the civil side, I think.
On the what?
On the civil side, I believe. I'm not.
Civil side?
Yeah, I don't know all the details, Chair Emmons, but she has been in and out of court related to this death since this happened to her husband.
So there's more layers here.
There is more. There is.
More layers, but I'm wondering in terms of if he's received earned time, she can receive notification of that from DOC, how much he's earned or a change of status. And I'm just wondering, is she receiving any of that information from DOC? Because that's part of the law.
I know we had a discussion about notifications she should have been receiving that she hasn't.
From DOC.
What those are, I believe from DOC. Yeah.
I'd be curious why she's going back to court and for what something. If he's already been convicted and has a sentence,
He's been serving time for a while.
but why go to civil court? That's what I'm.
She's been back to court. I thought she said civil court. I can't tell you that.
Well.
No, I appreciate what you said, Chris, about, the consideration, because I know you've told me this and you've told it to other people as well, that, this was, again, constituent led, and that, we'll find some way to, consider different paths for this, I think, and trying to find that, again, justice and making sure that it all works. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, I do, but I want to. I'll just wing it and hope I'm not an idiot. One thing I would just say, my opinion is not to get too deep into the details during a presentation, not testimony and the actual bill we're not taking up. But the other thing is, like, it may be in a civil thing. I would just assume. I don't know enough about this. Maybe liability for financial stuff versus you get your criminal side where you're going to prison or punitive, whatever you want to call it. And then you have the other side, which is, you caused this damage and we're coming to get the money that you should owe us. Those are my 2 comments.
Yeah, I don't know all the details of the ongoing things. Really what I tried to bring to the committee today was my bill and a little bit of why I brought
My point.
it. There's a whole few details. I truly wish my constituent could sit before this committee and tell her story. And Chair Emmons has been reached out. I mean, Phil jumped through hoops to do this for us. And I appreciate that. It's hard for her to leave. She's by herself.
Mary and then Joe?
Well, the part in your bill that really gets me is, and I hear it all the time from my constituents, you're now talking 10 felonies. When is enough enough? When do we say someone needs to be held accountable? And that's why I'm 100% behind this. And however we, just decipher to do, but we've got to stop this pretending that this is just going to go away and we're giving them benefits for something they've caused in 10 times down the road.
Well, for earned time, if they become reconvicted of another crime, they lose the earned time. So I think that has to be clear too, if you look at current law.
But yeah, I would certainly be interested if we can to hear from your constituent, Chris, and hope that we have time to understand how the statute currently reads and maybe the perspective of, DOC regarding the matter and other parties. But certainly, in the class of felony is certainly would be something to be taken under consideration, as Representative Hedrick pointed out. I don't think a several-time violent felon should be treated the first as a first-time non-violent felon. There's a point in time where one shouldn't be afforded the same earned time opportunities as others, based on the track record. But I don't know where that is. I would really need to hear a lot more information.
Thank you for giving me this
Thank you very much.
consideration.
So let's take a quick break because we have DOC coming in, and let's come back at 3 o'clock.